Thank you very much. My name is Jung Oh. I am the director of the Syracuse University Technology Transfer Office. So this conference is very interesting to me, and to hear the great technology commercialization stories for New York State. I have the privilege to introduce the CEO of Connect Pharmaceuticals, and this company is an interesting case study because usually in technology commercialization, we don't usually come across young/startup pharmaceutical companies. So we'll get a good insight into his experiences with trying to commercialize a technology from the ground up. And he brings with him a very extensive expertise in drug development. He's had 4 blockbuster drugs, including Claritin, Dorel, Zetia, and Clarinex. So he brought all that to market, and I'm going to assume that he must have started doing this when he was 18, because you know how long it takes to take drugs to the marketplace. So formerly, he worked with Schering-Plough, and most of his career was spent in drug discovery. And now he was also the Vice President of Technology Acquisition and External Collaboration with the objective of facilitating all areas of drug discovery-based collaborations with Schering-Plough. He has authored and co-authored more than 100 scientific publications. He is a graduate of Rutgers University and the University of Buffalo School of Medicine. Dr. Alan Barnett, please give him a warm welcome for him. Thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing your lecture.
Thank you for your introduction. That was very nice. Kinex Pharmaceuticals is in Buffalo, New York. It was started 4 years ago in September. So if you're asking yourself what kind of company is Kinex and what kind of success has it had, we measure our success in modules as you go along. So one success, obviously, is surviving for 4 years. In the process, we've raised a total of about $15 million. 14 million of that came from angel investors who invested, and a number of them liked what they saw and kept reinvesting, and we welcomed the opportunity. Some of the other successes that we've had is that we have a new drug for cancer, which is the first of its kind, and it is nearing the end of phase 1 clinical trials right now, and I'll say something more about that later. In addition to that, we've identified a second compound, also in the oncology area, that we hope to have an IND filed by the end of next year. For those of you who are not in the field, an IND is investigational new drug application that file with the FDA for permission to initiate clinical trials. And thirdly, as a third part of our overall strategy, which we've had from the very beginning, we have several new targets that we have set up, and we already have leads for those targets in the area of immunoinflammation and autoimmune diseases. The technology platform that we have came from the University of Buffalo. And what it is the design and synthesis of substrate competitive kinase inhibitors. Now, kinases have 2 mechanisms that you can use to inhibit them. One is to compete with ATP, and every drug that is in clinical trial or on the market that claims to be a kinase inhibitor interacts with the ATP site. We are the first company to have succeeded on the substrate site. And you say, and that has its very good points, but it also has difficulties associated with it. Just the idea of being first. The strategy that we adopted from day one is one of outsourcing. So we have the four founders founded the company. All of us have PhDs. We have one MD. Three of us got our PhDs from the University of Buffalo. We have a combined experience level of 50 years in the pharmaceutical industry. So this is not your average startup, university spin-off or startup. There's a big experience factor here. And it is the experience factor more than anything else that allows us to allowed us to adopt this total outsourcing strategy. And it's worked very well for us, and obviously there's some nuances around that. Third item was, obviously, if you have a company that only consists of 4 people, then you have to broaden that base, and you have to have a lot of collaborators, and especially you have to have a lot of consultants. None of the 4 founders considers himself or herself an expert in oncology, so obviously you have to have consultants in the area. Our initial target is a special kinase, SRC kinase, which is very important in different types of cancer, and obviously we have consultants who are experts there. But in putting that statement on the slide, what I wanted to convey was there are obviously scientific consultants, but there also, you have to bring in other people for other aspects of the process. And one of them, I think, is in the area of financing, and I'll talk more about that, raising money. What this slide is meant to convey is that there are certain significant points in the development of a drug, discovery and development of a drug. And I call these value points. And they're value points for us from the standpoint of raising money. So once we started up, we raised $750,000. That included money investments from the founders. So this wasn't a huge start, but we made every experiment count, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that as I go further. Selection of a development candidate is a very big one from the standpoint of raising money, and we did that about a year after we started, which is kind of a record time to go from an early lead in the low micromolar range to a bona fide lead, which is in the low nanomolar range and is orally absorbed and orally active and has the right duration of action and so on. So we did that in a year. We spent $1 million. So obviously we had to raise a little bit more money in the process as we got close to selecting a candidate. Then we filed the IND, which was about a year and a half. After that, we started clinical trials in November of last year, and we're now close to the completion of phase 1 trials. For those of you, again, who are not in the field, phase 1, primarily you determine the safety of your drug, and also you get information on the pharmacokinetics, on its absorption and duration of action. So the primary thing is safety. And according to the FDA guidelines, what you have to do is continue to go up in dose in stepwise fashion until you get to what is called the maximum tolerated dose. And you define that ahead of time in terms of what kinds of side effects you would consider to be significant adverse effects, and then you back off to the next lower dose, and that's your highest tolerated dose, and then you plan your phase 2 efficacy studies based on that determination. So we are nearing the end of phase 1 right now. We also have one other early indicator of success, and that is that we have a fully negotiated term sheet with a large pharma company for licensing of the first compound. We're now in the process of due diligence and completing the contract with them. Okay, you've seen some variation of this. I left off the last one, which is the IPO. And we have, even though IPOs are dead these days, and they'll come back, and then maybe they'll die again. You don't really know. But what we've done is to plan around the IPO, because what we will need to have put in place will serve us well no matter which way we go. If it's a merger, if we're going to be acquired, whatever the situation, having a well-developed pipeline and having new programs and leads on new programs for the future, all of that will play well, and that's how we've been functioning. As I indicated, almost all of our money has come from angel investors, but we also started with money from one local agency in Buffalo, an Erie County agency, and we have gotten some nice help from the state in the form of matching type funding from NISTAR, and I'm very grateful to NISTAR, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here today. And we also have an introductory SBIR grant. We've gotten a good score for the Phase 2 follow-up grant, and so we're very hopeful there. One of the points I'd like to leave you with in the end, or one of the points I'd like to make now, is that we went through this process kind of on our own, and we talked to a lot of people, and we did a lot of things, but there was no real facilitator there. And to my way of thinking, I think the tech transfer department of the university should play a key early role in pointing you in the right direction, because not only do you have to know who's giving out the money, but you also have to know whether your program fits with that program. And you don't know that unless you've been through it or you know somebody who's been through it. So there are certain programs which on paper say, oh yeah, you're eligible for this grant, and then you find out that the granting agency doesn't like drug discovery companies, or doesn't like to award money to drug discovery companies because they can get their money elsewhere, so we're going to give it to somebody else. Well, you could waste a lot of time writing applications. It's important to be with people who know, who've had experience and can point you in the right direction. There's, in addition to that, there was one state agency who purported to have funding for funding biotech companies and things like that. And then we found out after putting a lot of effort into that they don't really like to do that, because as they put it, they couldn't really tell the difference between a good biotech company investment and a bad one at an early stage. So, and that's one of the things that I'll get to. There are certain biases out there. Biotech, because of the failures of many companies, after the boom of the 80s and the 90s, a number of companies didn't make it. So there was a bias there. Cancer field, cancer is associated with a lot of failures. A lot of drugs come along, have very exciting mechanisms of action, but doesn't translate out to a real breakthrough. So there are biases out there you have to deal with. But coming back to the point, it would really help for new companies to have some real orientation in terms of where to get the funding and how to go about doing it. Venture capital, pharma licensing deal. I mentioned we're close to a deal with one company, but the main point on here is something that we found out by knocking on doors and meeting with people that wasn't out there, and that is both are very risk averse these days. So if you're a drug discovery company, you have to plan somehow on funding yourself through the end of phase 1 clinical trials, or if you're really good, or ideally a proof of concept efficacy study in phase 2. And that takes significant funding. So the VCs have pulled back, and they want to see the same thing. So they're looking for later stage. They want to make sure that they have a safer bet. And then finally, there are other possibilities other than an IPO if you're looking for going public or an equity event, acquisitions, mergers, or reverse mergers, which represent interesting possibilities. And we've already been approached a few times for merger possibilities because we have this drug discovery engine. Kinases, there are about 500 kinases in the genome, and there are a number of targets in there that are considered by pharma to be very good therapeutic targets if you could find a selective kinase inhibitor. So it represents a rich source of compounds, and there are a number of companies out there that started by in-licensing compound from somebody else and getting it into development and doing clinical studies. And lo and behold, they didn't have anything behind them. So compound bites the dust, they're in bad shape. So we would appeal to the companies that are out there that have compounds in development, have very good funding, but don't have a discovery engine. And if you come up with the right fit, then it might be worth it. Okay. Another point here, challenges encountered, and I'll try to get, I've got a slide on how we dealt with some of these, but obviously I mentioned, I mentioned the biotech environment and the cancer environment as well, history of failure. So as soon as you go out, you talk to investors, you talk to companies, you get hit with this history of failure, even though we're something different along the way. But we worked around that, and first we tackled it head on, and that's, I think, the main point. A lot of people don't know very much about drug discovery. It's a subspecialty. You could be a very good scientist, you could be a very good chemist or biologist and pharmacologist, but drug discovery is a subspecialty in terms of how you get from that idea, from that initial finding, to a drug that is working in clinical trials. So what you have to do is make sure you're not snowing anybody, you don't use a lot of jargon, and you try to educate them in the process. Because the first thing you'll hear is, what about the FDA? And we said, well, for the first drug, the FDA is not going to be a problem because we're not going to take it all the way through the process. And also, I've dealt with the FDA a number of times, and if you have good science and you stick to that science and you don't, try to oversell or overpromote, they're generally going to be reasonable. I mentioned the risk aversion of venture capital and pharma. What that does is it introduces a real uncertainty in terms of what lies ahead for you. So therefore, it's important to continue to reevaluate your strategy and to have backup plans in case this isn't working or that isn't working. Now, if you would have told me before we started that we were going to raise $14 million from angel investors, when everybody told us that you'll never be able to get more than $4 or $5 million, I would have believed that, never having done that before. But that's the way it's worked out, and therefore I feel a tremendous loyalty to our angel investors.
Can we raise some questions?
Oh yeah, please.
The statement there, risk aversion of pharma. Are you talking big pharma?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point.
I thought the trend was that they have determined that it may be too risky for themselves on their own to be developed, and they want partners and progress to a certain stage.
Right.
I thought they were going in the other direction as it relates to companies like your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's the difference between reading the newspapers and the trade publications and actually getting into the trenches. So we read the same articles. They said, we're golden. They need compounds. We've got compounds. We shouldn't have a problem. I spent 5 years on the other side of the table doing in-licensing for Schering Plough, and I felt, well, geez, I know what they want. I know what they need, and I know how the game goes. We should be able to work out something. But it's a very complex process, and this is, above all, is where you need a consultant. If you're going to be in this game and you don't know the industry very well, you absolutely have to have an experienced consultant here. Because one of the difficulties is the big companies have gotten so big that you don't know how to get into that company. Who do you go to? Is there one person in licensing that you should go to? You don't really know. And I'll give you an example. I recently was talking with one company, and a good-sized company, and they liked the technology, they liked what we were doing, and so on and so forth, but they were taking their time evaluating it, and I really wasn't sure, what was going on. The wind-up was we spoke with 3 different licensing people in the course of just several months. And I didn't know whether I was going down in the organization or going up in the organization. I didn't know whether I was gaining expertise by dealing with somebody who knew it better than somebody else. But it's that type of thing. Another very large company, I went in 3 different ways. I went in 3 different people, and a couple of these were very highly placed in the organization, and it went nowhere. So my conclusion was, and in some cases you don't even get phone calls returned, and you don't even get closure. You just say no answer is an answer. They're not interested because they haven't contacted me in response to direct inquiries. So pharma is made up of many different companies that operate very differently, and maybe the message hasn't filtered down. So maybe the executives are giving the talks that say, hey, we've got an in-license, but it hasn't really filtered down to the licensing people, because they're still, they still want, all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. And that also relates to the question of size, which I think is the next, let me get this first and then I'll go to size. Taking the outsourcing paradigm to the extreme, which is related really to being small. And that is, our investors are very happy with the idea that that we have a low overhead, we're not spending a lot of money, and we don't have to raise a lot of money, and we haven't sold them out in a VC deal or anything like that. So they're very happy with that. The VCs, on the other hand, will say, geez, that's great. You guys are not spending a lot of money, therefore you don't need a lot of money. That's great. But on the other hand, we'd like you to have more infrastructure. And I said, okay, what does that mean? What are you looking for? Well, you should have a chief financial officer. You ought to have a chief medical officer. You ought to have a chief regulatory officer. And I said, we have them as consultants. And it's, when we need them, we have them. So there's a bias against the company that's small, even one that's operating as efficiently as ours. Because if you go out there too early, they don't think you're going to be able to do it with the, you don't have, quote, the critical mass that they're looking for. And with companies, it's a very strange dynamic. They see you coming in the door and they say, how are 4 people going to accomplish something really meaningful when we have thousands of people working in the same area? And the answer is we did, and that's the way it goes. So yes, pharma is very interested, but you have to hit their sweet spot. But mainly, what it comes down to is with all of the varieties of companies that we talked to and that I mentioned. The one common denominator is they all want us to go further before they're ready to commit, except for the company that we're talking to now. Yes?
So I have a question. This related to being small and how you were able to, let's assume that the technology is a wonderful technology, and the university knows that it's a wonderful technology.
Right.
How were you able to convince the university to give the small company, I'm assuming this an exclusive license, when if they did their due diligence, they realized that there's a market for this.
must have overheard my conversation here. In contrast to our last speaker's experience, it took 13 months to negotiate the deal because they didn't have a template and we didn't have a template, but we knew the type of deal we wanted. We had a rough outline, we didn't have a template. But we went through several phases with them. The first phase was if these people with all this experience in industry are interested enough in the technology to start a company, why can't we do something at the university and maybe spin off our own company and do it by raising some small grant money and SBIR money. So we got them over that. We explained the facts of life to them, and we said, look, you're in a competitive area. You have to make a lot of compounds, and you have to test a lot of compounds. You can't do it with small money. So we got them over that. Then it became a matter of deal structure, and there were some other upsets along the way. But the windup was it took 13 months. They also didn't necessarily believe we could raise the money to do what we had to do. And we proved them wrong on several counts, and they've been very cooperative since and very helpful. But one of the points I mentioned that the tech transfer group should be proactive in terms of getting the company pointed in the right direction on funding. I think the tech transfer group can be or should be more involved in the start of the company and help out and facilitate wherever possible. In our case, they must have assumed that we had so much experience we didn't need any help, but it took us a while before we convinced them that we were the real thing, and ever since then things have gone well. We became very good at this. As I told you, we started with $750,000. We had some heavy patent costs that we had to account. We owed the university some money to compensate them for their patent costs. So we started out with relatively little. But on the other hand, we were lucky and we had success right away. So we showed a progression of accomplishments. And what that did was that encouraged existing investors to put additional money in, but it also opened us up to a lot of other investors. And when we, at the end of year one, when we said we have the compound, we're going to toxicology and then clinical trial with this drug, that was a major value point for us. And somebody told me at the very beginning that it gets easier to raise money as you go further. And I totally subscribe to that, as long as you're obviously making good progress and doing what you said you're going to do. I put down as a challenge being first in our area of kinase research. Now, this is obviously a tremendous goal to be first. Our patent position is incredible. I spent over 30 years in the industry. I've never seen an IP position as clean as ours, because we're the first to succeed in this space, and the patent office recognized that, and we had no trouble at all. We started with 3 patent applications. Now we have 4 issued patents and about 12 other filings as well. And that's all the good stuff around being first, and we can show, and more importantly, advantages of our approach over the existing ATP competitive approach and so on. So all those are positives. The other part is that when everybody else is working on one approach and you've succeeded on another, and one that they originally failed at a number of years ago, since the first approach you use with any enzyme is substrate competition, they then ask for more and more proof that, one, of the mechanism, that we were definitely doing this, and what I didn't tell you, the design of our compounds is such that it interacts with a complex that is formed within the cell of the Src kinase and 1 or 2 other proteins. We don't know exactly what's in that complex. So in order for our compounds to work, the complex has to be fully formed. Now, you can't just take that outside of the cell like an isolated enzyme and show that your compound is working and the enzyme kinetics and all that. It would take a good couple of years of a thesis project, I think, to try to develop a system for taking complexing SARC with other potential proteins and seeing how your compound behaves there. So that became an item that was difficult to deal with, and we dealt with it by surrounding the issue. It's my natural style. If you can't come up with the clinching experiment, and there was only one that we could come up with, and that was, we're finally getting to that now, but that was very expensive and time-consuming, and you had to have the right people there. We finally got around to it, but at the time we didn't. So our strategy was to do enough other experiments to eliminate other likely possibilities and then center it down to, well, you're left with, it should be working the way we thought. But that was a challenge, and still is until we do that clinching experiment, and that's what I really just described there. Okay, this is just a diagram to just get across, a cartoon to get across the idea that this is where the whole pharmaceutical industry is working. All ATP sites in here are identical across all 500 kinases in the genome, or essentially identical. The drugs that are working as kinase inhibitors work by binding outside of this pocket to allow them to interfere with the attachment of the ATP here. When you bind outside the pocket and the enzyme does not need these sites to function, one of the things that happens is mutations. So especially you're dealing with cancer. Cancer cells mutate anything that interferes with their growth. So you have resistance developing. This is the substrate site, the active site, so you don't see resistance occurring by that mechanism. And we knew from the very beginning that would be one thing. But there are other aspects here. This turned out to be very exciting, and we've developed a lot of interesting biology around it. But this is the basis of the technology. The other exciting thing in terms of the future is that other kinases in the same family, and these are tyrosine kinases, other kinases in the same family are different, but they have some homology. So in the SARC family kinases, it's called, there's a lot of homology between them, which means then that we have a starting point for a program around a different kinase from the compounds that we've already made in our files. Okay, this is something that I think that is very important, and any startup or young company should confront the issue of risks rather than finessing it or rather than leaving it for people to bring up. Everybody knows with startup companies, especially in the area of biotech and especially in cancer area, there are certain risks involved and there are certain probabilities involved. And our position, and it served us well, is to confront these and say, all right, whoops, sorry. All right, what are we doing to reduce your risks? We've taken them into account. What are we doing to reduce it? Well, one, we have a very experienced management team, about 50 years experience in the pharmaceutical industry, different phases of the process. 3 of the 4 of us are former CEOs, or in my case, a CEO. And there's a total of 6 marketed drugs, 5 having peak sales of $500 million or greater. So that's one way of looking at risk reduction. Another way is we have a broad-based technology platform. I told you that there are a number of kinases that are very good drug targets. We've started with one. We've succeeded. We have leads on others. So it's the gift that keeps on giving. So there's security in that. If something happens to the lead compound, we have others behind it. Superior IP position. So that's one less thing that the investor has to worry about. So we had a patent issued, which composition of matter, which contains our compound in clinical trial. It was issued about a year ago. That's very comforting. You don't have to worry, look behind you, worry. That isn't to say that companies won't be coming after you in the future, but in the meantime, you don't have to worry about losing patent. Okay, outsourcing strategy. This keeps the overhead low, and it also allows us to control, in terms of control the flow of the work. If we don't have the money, then we have to delay certain things. We have to do certain things instead or first. And so the outsourcing strategy has served us well, and it's kept our costs down. As I mentioned, we had four founders, was the company. We started with salaries that are at the lowest end of the industry and lower than that. And then we started off by taking half salary and then working our way up to full and adequate salary. And that is something I think the investors not only accept but appreciate, and it's part of keeping your costs low and stretching the dollar. Partnering strategy. Here, again, you lower some of the risks by partnering early. So with the first compound, we said, all right, let's partner at the end of phase 1 clinical trials or phase 2A. However, the second candidate that we'll be going with by the end of next year, we're going to take that further. So we're going to take that through phase 2. Therefore, should be able to do a richer deal, and we can do that by that time. Simple thing, annual audit starting at year 1 when we had virtually nothing. I mean, we started in September, 750,000. There's very little in there. But looking ahead to the IPO, we wanted to, one, have annual audits down there. But the other thing is we wanted to assure our early investors that somebody else was looking closely at the books and at the expenditures, and that served us well as well. And finally, there's a flexible exit strategy, and it's flexible because the core of getting you there involves building a pipeline of at least two compounds in development and another one coming along behind, and having enough infrastructure that you're considered to be a reasonable company. Okay. In summary, these are factors that I think are primary, that have served us well, and I think are primarily responsible for whatever success we've had. True teamwork. People talk about teamwork. We really lived it. Not only teamwork, but decision making. We prided ourselves on once we had the information at hand of making a decision within a day, 2 days at the most. We didn't agonize about anything. And that made for a cleaner operation, fewer delays, and so on. Obviously, there's no bureaucracy there if it's 4 founders and emailing each other and having teleconferences at regular intervals. Technology platform, obviously, very important. Turned out to be even more exciting than we thought originally. As we went further, we got more and more exciting data. As an example, one part of our strategy was to take the first cancer drug into animal model studies and use that to decide which cancers would respond best to our drug. The big surprise was that our drug worked in every type of human cancer that we looked at. And that includes a whole slew of in vitro human tissue samples, but it also includes so-called xenograft models where human tumor cells are implanted in immunocompromised mice. That was a very exciting, very pleasant surprise. And we're obviously doing more on that just to make sure of what we have. It could be we have a second mechanism in there because SARC inhibition was thought of to work very well in some areas but not in others. We're working in everything in very potent fashion. So we're onto something, and we're in the process of trying to nail that down. Obviously, very good science. That's never been an issue. This is one area we don't take shortcuts. We do the right thing. Efficiency and outsourcing. Let me just say a word about that, because what we did, I think, also served us well, was that when we sent a study out for bid, we sent it to, let's say, a couple companies that we knew by reputation were well regarded, and then we sent it to a couple others who by reputation should be a lot cheaper. And what we did in the end was, if we could get one of the two better companies in the middle somewhere, that's the one we went with. So we balanced. We never took the cheapest. We always balanced what we knew about the company and versus price. And if we could get them into a reasonable range for us, that's the one we went with. As a result of that, we had no setbacks. And to a young company involved in drug discovery, if an animal model study doesn't work, you've spent 4 to 5 weeks doing this study in an animal model. If it doesn't work, you got to set up again and get that done again, and so on. So you have to be careful. You have to stretch the money, and that's how we handled outsourcing. Whoops. Okay, enlisting knowledgeable and motivated collaborators. That's something that worked out beautifully for us. We have people involved who are really good. We have 2 people who are experts in SARC kinase, and one at Roswell Park, the other at MD Anderson, and they're both very excited by the developments here. They're looking to finally see what a very specific selective SARC inhibitor will do in different kinds of cancer. So all of that has helped us. Once again, judicious use of consultants. This is beyond the scientific consultants. This involves people in other areas. The other thing is, as we've succeeded more with this drug, and as we've published on some of the early findings, what we've been getting is proposals to study our drug in their systems. And so what we've done is we've made selections in terms of things that we wanted to add to our database, and that's how we've determined that our drug works in so many different cancers. We didn't bring in all these cell lines ourselves. We're dealing with people who have collections of human lung cancer cell lines, and that's their thing, and they've tested our drug, and it works, whereas the standards do not work well, and things like that. So that really helped us extend, and those studies were done at no cost to Kynex. Regular reports to investors and an open door policy. I think this has helped to foster people reinvesting in the company, because they feel comfortable that they're getting the right information, and they judge that by seeing us progress to each point after we said, this is where we're going, we expect to get there by such and such a time. So that served us well as well. The open door policy part of it is that any investor can email me. They have my cell phone number, and they can contact me if something's really bothering them or they have a question. And nobody has abused the privilege. Yes?
Question on your open door policy with investors. Were your investors also experienced in the field? Did they come out of the industry, or were they financial investors, or was it a mixture of both?
It was a real mixture. People skilled in the field didn't come in till later, and that's where the bias comes in and the previous history of failure. So they were the hardest to convince. And in the beginning, when we went out to raise money, that was a difficulty or a challenge, because they said, well, if this is so great, we have Roswell Park Cancer Institute right over here. Is anybody from Roswell investing? Well, at the time, nobody was. And we just said, well, you know, we're a startup company. Not everybody has an appetite for investing in new ventures and things like that. But after a while, we have several investment bankers who have invested in our company significantly, and a number of other people. We have people from the industry. It's kind of a broad cross-section. A lot of people locally who have relatives that died from cancer. They also came in.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Question. I apologize, you may have covered this at the beginning, but how many rounds of investment or dollars and therefore number of investors? It sounds like it's a diversity between angel investors and institutional investors. Could you just recap that?
Sure.
What's your comment in context of how open the open door?
Okay. We're up to about 100 investors right now. We raised a total of $15 million, 14 of which came from these angel investors. $1 million or less came from public sources. And so that part has worked.
No venture funds, institutional per se?
No venture funds involved. We're talking with a small venture company in New York right now. One is a backup, but also if we decide to go ahead to phase 2 trials, we're going to need more money. It turned out they have experts in oncology that are very much involved with the company, and therefore they get it, and they're very interested in doing something, and they would syndicate to other smaller VCs. So, still, we're now at a point where we're end of phase 1, so maybe if we went back to the VCs, they might be more amenable at this stage. But on the other hand, we have such a commitment to our angels. I don't know. We would only go that route if we had to right now. Yes?
You mentioned that you licensed the technology from the university.
Yes.
But I'd like to ask if you're outsourcing to universities to do some of the scientific work. It sounds like
Yes.
you're outsourcing to companies, but you're also outsourcing to universities?
Oh, yes. So, well, one of our collaborators is Erwin Gelman at Roswell Park. He's an expert in SARC, so he does a lot of the work on mechanism of action for us, and we do this on a contract basis. When we did the animal model studies at MD Anderson, Gary Gallick, also an expert in SARC, he did that work, and that was done on a contract basis as well. And then there are a number of other, as I mentioned, university investigators that approached us and just want the compound, and we were happy to do that as long as they supplied us with the data, and didn't publish until we gave them permission based on looking into any patent aspects that might arise. So really, it was a combination really of there are certain skills you could not get in any contractor, like these experts in SARC. So obviously we went that way. But for other things that are relatively routine, we knew we could count on the contractor to deliver in X period of time. And time was very crucial to us, as I mentioned, because we've never raised a lot of money at any one time. So we were always raising money in smaller increments. We've had about 5 rounds, and the last 2 have been oversubscribed. We just closed the last one recently, and it's all been based on making continued progress. We've raised the price of the stock really in the beginning very little to encourage reinvestment on part of our existing investors. But we started at 7.5 4 years ago. We're now at 17. So we took a couple jumps recently because we felt we were entitled to it after first filing an IND, and then now we're completing the phase 1 trials. So that could involve another jump as well. Yes?
Because you've just gone through this, the credit crisis we saw in October, it's been my impression, and I don't really have a lot of data points, that private and angel investors have more confidence coming out the other side of this than institutional investors.
Mm-hmm.
Do you care to comment on your perspectives on that?
Well, My only data relates to the last round, which we closed at, well, we just closed recently, but I guess it was still open at the time that the credit crisis hit. And we were oversubscribed. We got a great response. One of the things that we offered as a startup that we've carried through, since we're still working on the Series A guidelines, is that we pay a 7% dividend, which is tax deferred. It's looking pretty good these days, isn't it? And so the 7% dividend is, of course, is tax deferred. It's accrued, and it's paid out at a time when there's where there's when we go public or some other liquidity event occurs. That's the time that there's a payout. So that looked pretty good to investors as well. But mainly, it's, I think, the progress and the upside potential, and seeing that we now have a second drug coming along, and that looks very exciting as well, and complementary to the first one. It's not going to step on its toes in any way as far as we can project from animal studies. So all of that still encouraged investment.
Just to build on a comment you made earlier, as you're considering institutional venture, if you choose to pursue clinical trials, are you treating that as a either-or? It would seem to be, with your reputation and the progress you've made, that sub-licensees would be knocking at your door, so you'd weigh whether to out-license now, let somebody else carry it through trials versus raise more money. Is that an active part of that discussion?
Not so far. We were waiting until the end of phase 1, and now we're almost there. So we could go out and do that. We have a letter of intent that's in place, and that will expire by the end of this month, I believe. And at that time, if we don't have a deal in place, then we could go back to selected pharma companies. One that we really felt were interested, but wanted reassurance of getting through phase 1 and making sure that the dose that we could go to in phase 2 would be high enough to block the enzyme, and we're many times above that right now. So it's a good picture. So we may go back. We prefer to do the deal now because planning for a phase 2 program it takes a lot, and we would need either more infrastructure. We would have to spend a lot of money, more money on consulting and CROs and all of that. Plus, we have a second drug coming along. We'd like to focus on that. We want to do the toxicology program and all that. So the funds coming in from the first deal would finance the second and the third drug. So we would prefer that. On the other hand, we're fully capable of taking it further. And that's where the VC would come in. But even our position, though, is that even if we do in fact close the deal and we get our upfront and all that, and we'll have enough money to proceed, given the vagaries of the financial world, it may still make sense to take not the full amount, but half of that amount and say, okay, this is our cushion for the future. We can go all the way through the IPO with this money and so on. So it's a nice position to be in, and as one of my collaborators reminds me, strike while you're hot. Company's doing well, raise as much money as you can without diluting everybody out. Okay. Yeah, I think I got through that. The last item is something that we do, and it sounds obvious and all that, but we really do stick to it. We have developed a long-term plan, business plan that we're still following in its outline form, but we've made obviously some changes and adjustments along the way. But there are always strategic decisions that you have to make. There are always choices, and what if the contract doesn't work out with this company? What if? And it's good to periodically do that, and we try to do that, and it's very healthy to do that. We try to do it off-site, get away from everything, and just brainstorm about where we are where we should be going and what else we can do. Yes?
How many folks on the board and what background? What's the background of that?
Yeah, that's always an interesting process in terms of the makeup of your board. I'm on the board. The chairman of the board is also one of the co-founders, Johnson Lau. He's a PhD, MD, accomplished scientist, mainly in the virology area, but more importantly, he was formerly a CEO of a company called Ribofarm. In the process of doing that, he raised a lot of money via the IPO. As he puts it, it was the second largest IPO in history. So, and he spent a couple of years as an investment banker with Roth Capital on the West Coast. So he's one of those people that covers a lot of ground, has a lot of breadth. So he's very important. We have one local person who we put on the board because one, he's one of the original investors in the company, but he's a former entrepreneur, and he sold his company and did very well. And also, he was elected by the other investors. So we had an election for the first one. Since that time, we've added on other board members. We recently added David Shaw, who was one of the founders of Watson Pharmaceuticals, one of the most successful generic companies, and David's expertise is in formulation area, and he's just joined us, and he's definitely a very good addition. We'd like to add, and then in addition to that, we have observers, and the way we treat our observers is they're significant investors, and in certain cases with the local and the county money, they came along with it. So they're there to monitor their investment, and we agreed to that. And then we've extended that to a couple other of our investors as well. And the way we treat the, quote, observers is they're non-voting members of the board, but we tell them, feel free to join in the discussion, give us your opinions. We want to hear from you. A couple of them are very successful in business, and so therefore their opinions are welcome. And so I think it's a good mix. We'll probably add another person onto the board in the next year or so, and it'll probably be somebody who actually was an entrepreneur himself, started a company in the pharmaceutical area, or was involved in running one of the small biotechs, somebody like that to help us through. But we have to talk about it. So we've tried to. The other one I left out was Jin Wu, who's president of Xenobiotics Laboratories in Princeton, New Jersey, and they're a pharmaceutical service outfit. So they do extensive pharmacokinetic work for the industry. And Jin is a significant investor, but he also knows the business well. He's done a few deals himself. So the next person would either be somebody more on the business side, or somebody more specifically in pharmaceutical business side. But we have a good board, and thus far we haven't had any split votes or anything. We work hard to bring things around so that there's a consensus, and that's served us well as well.
Yes. So how many years are you into this now?
4 years in September.
And do you still have the original inventors on the company? Or?
Yes.
Okay, so all 4 founders were inventors?
No, just one of the founders is an inventor, David Hangauer, who's on the faculty in the chemistry department at the university. So it was his work that served us well, and so he's the only one from the university.
Anybody else have any questions? Oh,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
How did you identify the technology? Was it your prior experiences or history with the university, or how did you come upon it?
Yeah, it's a long story, but one of the things I always did was keep in contact with people, certain people at the university. And after I took early retirement from sharing, I kind of let the word get around. I was offering my services. If there was somebody on the faculty that was felt they had some technology and wanted to do a deal with a pharmaceutical company or whatever, or just wanted to judge whether anybody would be interested, I just offered to serve as an unpaid consultant. And so that was okay. And I did that for one person who turned out to be a co-founder. She and David Hangower got together, and they were talking about starting a company, but they weren't sure what to do. So they called me up one day and asked me to review the technology with them. And I didn't sign anything or anything like that. And it was a non-confidential presentation, but I said, sure, I'd be happy to. So they went through the presentation, and I asked all kinds of questions, and I acted as an unpaid consultant. And they had a lot of the answers, the things they hadn't thought of and all that. And then I gave my honest advice and told them, all right, I think this is what you ought to do, and this is how you ought to do it. And I don't think you should approach pharma until you've gone so far. And so they evidently liked what I had to say, because they said, well, would you like to join us? And I said, no, I'm in retirement. I'll certainly help you. So I can be a consultant. I can form a scientific advisory board. I can be on board of directors. Be happy to help. They said, no, we want you as CEO. And I had already told them I thought the stuff was great, and that it shouldn't be that difficult to come up with a new drug. So one thing led to another, and we talked, and they hit me at the right time, and that's how it came about. So I wasn't the superior talent scout who uncovered this. It was there, and they weren't sure how to proceed with it.
But you were in a position, or you placed yourself in a position where you were taking.
I was available.
You were looking at you had access.
Yes.
To view many
Yes.
technologies.
Yes, that's right.
Any other questions? I just have one final question. Without getting too much into detail, what were some of your licensing terms? Was it equity, royalty, any upfront?
With the university?
Yes.
That's part of the 13 months was the terms that we wanted. Our view was that, their view was they loved the royalty. They wanted a royalty in there. Our view was that if we're going to do a deal with a pharmaceutical company, we didn't know what stage we would do the deal, which meant we didn't know what to expect in terms of a royalty. And if we put in a royalty for them, that would make it difficult for us to do a deal that would satisfy our investors and all that. So we tried to steer them away from that. Instead, we offered them equity in the company, a piece of the company. And what we envisioned was that we would work together with the people there. They would be of help to us as we went along. So we offered them a certain percentage, and we sort of kind of agreed on that, and that was okay. But then they wanted some return on their costs. So we reimbursed them for the patent costs. We paid a licensing fee. And none of this was a lot, but at the time, since we didn't have much money, it was significant for us. But we carried through, and as we went further, we owed them a little bit more. I think we still, if we do a deal, I think we still owe them a payment, and that's not too onerous at all. So it was mainly equity. So they're our partner in that sense.
1223.